Tonight we want to talk about justification for self-defense. And I think one of the places we really want to start to talk about this topic is what do we do or what are the criteria or when are we justified in shooting our defensive gun, our pistol, our revolver, whatever we decide to carry. When are we justified in using that to defend ourselves or someone we love, family member, child, somebody we might come across who's being attacked? Maybe we're going out to the parking lot after work, someone's being attacked in the parking lot, and we feel the need to defend them and to help them. When are we justified in using our firearm to possibly take the life of another person? So those are some of the things that we want to talk about. And this is a very serious topic because it has the potential to, yes, save our lives or the lives of a loved one or a stranger whose life we choose to protect. But it also has ramifications for us because based on our decisions, we can end up in trouble. We can end up being arrested. We can end up being prosecuted by the local law enforcement authorities, the local prosecutor, the city prosecutor, the county prosecutor, etc. We can also be sued in civil court by people that we shoot or the families of the people that we might have to shoot. We might be responsible if not every single shot we fire is accounted for and they go stray. They do some damage. Say they hit an innocent person. We fire 5 shots. 3 of those shots hit the target, hit the bad guy. 2 of them go stray. 1 of them does some property damage. The other one actually hits somebody, hits another person. And so those are the things we want to talk about. First and foremost, we must understand, and all of us who carry a gun for personal defense must understand that we individually are responsible to hold everyone else out there with respect and keep them safe. We have a duty to every other person that's out on the street, that's in our communities, everybody. We have a duty to keep them safe. Now, if we are being attacked or we go to the defense of another person who's being attacked, it is probable that a judge, a jury, a local prosecutor would decide based on the evidence that yes, you're probably, it's probably okay to assume that that person is attacking you with a deadly weapon, is going to do great bodily harm or injury or kill you or cause death to you or someone else, then you do not have the responsibility to hold that person harmless. You don't have the duty to keep them safe. So generally we have a duty to every other person to keep them safe. But if somebody's attacking us, that may not apply, that duty may not hold for that specific person. Okay. And also, when we are being attacked or we decide to defend ourselves, there are some criteria that you need to have in your head, and that you need to be able to remember and make a judgment call on just like that. Quickly, you must be able to determine, is this the situation where I'm going to be justified under self-defense laws to defend myself. The first thing is you need to feel like you are in jeopardy. You need to feel like your life is being threatened, or the life of someone you're with, or this other third person perhaps. You need to feel like if you don't act, you don't do something, then you're going to sustain serious bodily injury or death. Alright? So if you feel like you or somebody else is in jeopardy of great bodily harm or death, then that's one thing that's going to help you to justify your actions. The second thing is Does this person who's attacking you have the means to do that damage? Is this person so large and so much bigger than you, or so much bigger than the person you're trying to defend, that they could kill them or do great bodily harm to them without a weapon? Or do they have a weapon? Is it a rock? Is it a stick? Is it a deadly weapon? A knife? A gun? Those kinds of questions is what you have to ask yourself. Does that person have the means or the ability to do great damage to my body or to kill me? And if the answer to that is yes, then the second criteria has been met. All right. The third criteria here is, does the person have the opportunity to do it? In other words, are they so close to you that they could actually do the things they threaten to do? If they say, hey old man, give me your money and your car keys, or I will kill you, and I will do it with this knife. I will stab you with this knife. Then you must assume, and they're close enough to you that they could certainly get to you and stab you with the knife. Then three criteria are there. That they made the threat, you feel that you're in jeopardy, they have the means, which is the knife or the weapon, and they're close enough, they have the opportunity to do that to you. Now, if you are behind a chain link fence, or you are locked in a secure home or someplace, and they didn't have the opportunity to get to you because perhaps they were on the other side of a chain link fence or something, with a knife, they're not going to be able to do much damage to you. They can threaten, they can wave the knife at you, but if there's a barrier there they can't get to you, then you may not be justified in using your gun to defend yourself in that situation. So you have to have all three of those things present. You have to have the threat, or you feel in jeopardy. The person who's aggressing you, the aggressor, has to have the means to hurt you or to kill you, and they have to have the opportunity. The opportunity has to exist. Now, a lot of people say also that when you get questioned, say by the police or by the district attorney, and they question you about what happened in this scenario, and you say, well, and they ask you perhaps, did you have the ability to get away? Could you have run away? Could you have gotten your car and driven off? Could you simply have gone into a store, back into your place of business, and called the police? Was that an option? If that was an option, then they may not feel that you are completely justified in self-defense. Although some states have stand your ground laws, which mean that if you are in a place that you're legally able to be in, it's a public parking lot, it's the parking lot of your business, it's your home, out on the street, downtown somewhere, you are legally have a right to be there, and you are attacked, and the three criteria are met, the jeopardy, the threat, the means, and the opportunity, then you can stand your ground, and fight. It's just like back in 1875 in downtown Dodge City. You can go out on the street and face them man to man. Not all states have that requirement, however. Some states do. You have to know where you live in your jurisdiction what the laws are in your jurisdiction, because some places require that you retreat first, and then when you're cornered and you can no longer retreat, the only option you have left is to fight, then you can fight. So in those states you've got four options you have to meet. The first three we talked about, and you have to retreat until retreat is no longer possible. Other jurisdictions, it's only three. You have to feel you're in jeopardy, there has to be a means to do damage to you, and they have to have the opportunity. In those stand your ground states, then you can fight at that point. But the smart thing and common sense tells me that if you can retreat, do it. It's always best to retreat. It's always best to not have the fight, because you may not win. You may be justified, but if you're killed, justification doesn't mean very much to your widow or to your family. So if you can retreat, what we teach our students is certainly do that. Retreat if you can, because if you don't, somebody might ask that question, especially if you're in a jurisdiction where you have a requirement to retreat. So those are the things for justification that you need to keep in mind. And you also need to remember that if you're carrying concealed, you need to have a concealed carry permit valid in that jurisdiction. You can't just go packing a gun usually. Now some places have open carry allowed, in which case maybe you can open carry with a gun. But you should know the laws and know the requirements of the area where you are carrying your gun, because if you go out of state and say your license in a certain state is also recognized in a neighboring state, they may not have the same laws. They may recognize your permit to carry a concealed gun, but they may not have the same laws. Your state may be stand your ground. The neighboring state may be you have a duty to retreat first. You have to know that when you go out of state. So justifications are important here. You really need to know and have those decisions in your mind. What we tell our students is run the scenarios that you think you might possibly encounter based on where you normally go, what your personal threat analysis is, what you think the risks are to you based on where you work, where you hang out, where you go for entertainment, where you go on weekends, all those kind of things. You do a personal risk assessment and make your thought processes based on that, and then come up with a plan and make sure you understand clearly what it is that you have, the criteria you have to meet to be justified. So self-defense, also one thing you need to remember too is if you plead and you get arrested and you go to a trial, because some jurisdictions are politically motivated to try any kind of a gun incident because it's their political persuasion to do that, make an example out of gun guys or gun gals. If they do that and you enter a plea of self-defense, then what you're doing is admitting, it's called an affirmative defense, which means you affirm or you agree that yes, I used my firearm and I defended myself, and in the process of defending myself, that guy was shot and yes, he died. But I had to do it to save myself, my grandchildren, my wife, my grandma, my grandpa, my neighbors, whatever it might be. So you have to realize that if you enter an affirmative defense, you're admitting that you shot the person. What you have to then prove, and the burden is on you, yourself, to prove that that was justified, and you have to be able to cite all the reasons why. And here's where that discussion about I retreated, I ran as far as I could, I got cornered by these three bad guys, we had no other option, I went to my firearm and I fought my way out. Now if that's the case, you're probably fine if you have a good lawyer and you have a jury that, or a grand jury that thinks that that sounds reasonable to them. It's also based on what's called, and when we say the word reasonable, this whole thing is based on the reasonable man concept, meaning what would a reasonable person think? If I told this story to a dozen reasonable people from my community, would they say, oh, he was absolutely justified, I'd have done the same thing myself, he was justified in what he was doing, there's no question in my mind, he was totally justified, it was self-defense. If all the thought processes of the reasonable people in your community match your reasonable thought processes, and what you did and the way you explain it can be understood by other reasonable people, and they would reasonably say, oh, absolutely, self-defense, no doubt about it, then you're probably fine. You have to remember that all this is based on a reasonable man theory, that would a reasonable person think what you did was okay and justified. So those are some things to think about when it comes to justifications. We're really making this for our students as a way for them to both brush up on what we've talked about in class and also to look at this before they come to class so they have some idea of what we're going to talk about when they get here. So we hope this has been helpful. We recognize that we are not lawyers. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is just generic principles that we're putting out, and it is not in any way legal advice. I am an engineer by my first education is engineering, so I'm not a lawyer by any means. I don't intend to be a lawyer. So please do not assume this is legal advice. But it is, take it as a general good idea from a friend who has studied up on this. All right. And if you have questions about this, find a self-defense lawyer in your area and put them on retainer. Get them to interpret the local laws in your area for you in personal defense. It's not a bad idea to have a lawyer on retainer anyway. Put their card in your wallet, so if you get confronted by something, then you have somebody you can call. So anyway, we hope this has been helpful. Again, it's just meant as good information, and it is not legal advice. So go find yourself a good lawyer if you need a good legal advice, and we hope that never comes, but these are some things to keep in mind. We hope it's been helpful. And there are some things I want to recommend to you. There's some good literature out there about this kind of thing, justifications. Some of the books we like. This happens to be a book by Massad Iob, In the Gravest Extreme. It's still in print. We suggest this one. It talks a lot about justifications and the reasons and the things that you can do to defend yourself. And it gives a much better overview than I can give you. It talks about self-defense and lethal force and so on. So we suggest that this is one of many, but this is certainly a good one, and so we'll recommend this one to read besides what we have to say. But we like what Massad Iob says. We like Massad Iob. I've met Massad. Very nice guy. Very happy to be able to do whatever he can to help people. And I appreciate all the things that he's done, and so this is one thing we're going to recommend to you.